We won't introduce ourselves. We're just going to go straight into this
Straight
one.
into it.
Welcome back.
Welcome to the WIBs.
You know who we are.
You know who we
Yeah.
are. If you don't, I'm Natasha.
I'm Penny. That was a very sensual whisper.
Oh my goodness. It's so funny being able to hear ourselves now because like if they're taking too long, I'll just start doing this on the microphone.
Don't you dare. Don't you dare.
And it really just speeds things up.
You know what? We've lost all of our listeners now.
Yeah,
Thank you for
I'm
that.
sorry,
So
guys.
The
I'll
one
never do it
person
again to you.
listening in their car, probably in
Sorry,
Doncaster
Mum.
somewhere. Hi, Mum.
My mum, who's our number one listener, and your mum.
Yeah, together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. We love our mums, the main listeners, but that's not about them today. Today, what is it about?
Today is gut versus data. Which should you follow when decision making? Ooh, this is a good one. I think this is a good one because I feel like I used to be big on gut and following your gut, and I still am. But now I think I drive data-made decisions more and encourage them more than I do gut.
Yeah,
now,
I
which
think
is interesting.
I think it really depends on what you're doing. Like when we come to making these decisions, like if we're seeing, I guess the world that we work in, like e-commerce, for example, it's really a lot easier a lot of the times to make these data-led decisions. It might take time to get there, and I think that's why a lot of the times people may not necessarily want to go for a data-led decision because you need the time for the data to accumulate. But say, for example, if you're making if you're choosing between two images on a product page on a website, for example, and for those not in e-commerce, trust me, it makes a difference. You may not think it does, but it does. The psychology of it is wild. But okay, so say for example, you're choosing between two product images, and you can see one has a click-through rate of like 50 people and the other one has a click-through rate of 100 people, like wanting
Which one would you choose? And I've been proven wrong so many times on that as well. Before we go into the juicy bits, let's just define for anyone listening who's like, what do you mean? Like when people hear the word gut, they're like, okay, I take my probiotics, chill. But what do we mean by gut versus data? And I think in this situation, gut refers to intuition, instincts, emotions. It's that feeling in your gut that tells you what to do. You kind of like, you don't necessarily know why. It just kind of tells you to do it.
Yeah, it's your instincts. And then obviously data, on the other hand, no surprises. It's about information. It's about the facts. It's about the evidence. Do you have the receipts? Basically.
Yeah, do you have the receipts? Absolutely. And that's where it affects like the quality, accuracy, effectiveness of the decisions, because I think that they both need to play a part in it. Absolutely. And especially if you've got experience, you can't, go like example, right? Let's go straight in with an example. You've got a candidate that's amazing on paper. They've got huge, like all of these amazing accolades. They've got all of the data. Like the data tells you that they're the perfect person. But when you meet them, your gut's just like, oh, there's something not there.
Yeah, this isn't it. Yeah,
it's not it. So that's a really good example of when those two can conflict and when you need to go with one or the other. And in that situation, I think trust your gut 100%. Like there's something that's telling you whether it's, I don't know, body language or a look or whatever it is. It just makes you feel a bit icky.
Yeah, and we all know that a gut-led decision, I mean, it can be informed by our own biases. Like I would be lying to say if it wouldn't be.
That's a good, I didn't even think of that, yeah.
But sometimes that's an appropriate thing. And I think that when you're holding a position at work or in your personal life, whatever it is, you do need to understand when to lean into one or the other, and being able to, I guess, know yourself well enough to know whether or not the decisions and the instincts that you have need to be kind of like reaffirmed with a bit of data. That's a skill set within itself to be able to kind of know, okay, potentially I might be a little bit biased here. Yeah, maybe I should do some further digging. Maybe I should get some hard evidence to be able to back this up.
Well, I think the reality is with this, there is no one size fits all. We know that. There's no one size fits all to this question. It's not which one should you do in general in life. Should you follow your gut or should you follow data? I think the answer is there's no answer. There's no one size fits all. However, there are different tools that can help you to determine which way is the best way to go. Is it a decided, like what you said before about the product image? If you had asked me, I reckon 10 years ago, I would have been like, gut, obviously. You can tell. But that's because I didn't realize that the data that we had access to in a situation like that, and I have been proven wrong so many times in that situation. Back to that product image, like we used to, me and my boss at the time, we used to have like back and forth, and I'd be like, nah, that's it. And then we decided to test it with data, and it wasn't until then that I was like, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Cool. It happens.
And I
It
know it's like
happens, apparently.
I've been the same way too, and I think that like no one wants to be proven wrong by data, but I think that's the precise reason why you should kind of look to make your decisions a hybrid between the two, because I think that you can really benefit from that. But when we think about the gut-based decision, I think we know generally it's about when you've got things that maybe a little bit more emotionally charged, maybe a little bit more time sensitive.
That's when I think you should use your gut.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you should. So when to use your gut is when you're right. It's emotionally charged or it's time sensitive, because at that position you can't be like, can you please give me a 20-page report as to why that's the right product? Like if you've got to make a decision, you've got to make it fast. You don't have that. That's where your gut is the most important thing.
Like photo shoots are a great example of that.
Yep,
I mean, obviously like candidates and hiring people, like that's a big one too. You have the data part of it, but you do need to ultimately make a gut decision on who's going to be a great fit within a team. Great. But I also think like on those more creative projects, like we've done so many photo shoots together now.
Yeah.
And I think that you can almost get analysis paralysis when you're looking at comparison and data.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if you're a creatively minded person, you just need to run with instinct on that. It's like, okay, well, I kind of know that this is going to be the thing that's going to work, and I can't explain it or validate in the same way that I need to with any other decision, but I just know that this is going to work. And 9 times out of 10, I feel like when I've trusted my gut on those kind of things, it's been to our advantage.
Absolutely. And I can say the same thing about hiring people. I know that there's been times where we've hired and I felt like it was the wrong thing to do, but I couldn't argue with the data or what we needed at the time. And I was like, oh, well, right, maybe you're just getting in your own head. Maybe this is something, and they're little things that you pick up, whether it's, as I said before, body language or the way that they only shake the men in the room's hand and not yours. Like that. Little things like that. I was like, maybe I'm just being a little bit over the top. Maybe I'm just like, maybe I looked too much into that. Well, no, I didn't, because it ended up being completely apparent when that person came into their role that that's exactly the type of person that they were, and that didn't fit in with us at all. It can fit into other places, you do your thing, but in our place it just didn't make sense. So I think in that situation, you do need to trust your gut, because it is quite time sensitive, and it's not, you need to trust your emotions sometimes. We've spoken about this before, where people kind of dramatize emotions in the workplace, but I do think that they can be used as power. And in this situation, trusting your gut and using that emotion to make those decisions is really important.
Yeah, I really like that approach of how we look at it like that. And I think that's a very like practical way to kind of approach gut-made decisions.
So then, okay, that's gut. Cool, we got gut sorted. You know what to do with your gut.
Yeah,
you know how
that's it. We lean heavy into the gut.
I know, and like I don't know, like every other woman out there, I've got like the biggest gut problems as well. So like when we talk about gut's like a trigger word. I'm like, oh, here we go.
Girls have gut issues.
I know, but this is gut, like a positive gut, I guess. So the next part then is data. Okay, so cool. So we know how to use when to use your gut, but when do you start using data?
So it's around those decisions that have, I guess, they're a little bit more complex, or they have a longer term implication. So when you're looking at putting something like this together, it's obviously going to be a little bit more time consuming. It's something that I think if you have maybe like more than like an hour or a day or a couple of days to think about and consider it, that's when you start to look at making those data-led choices. Because obviously with data, you need that time to let it accumulate to be able to kind of then have that put together to make that informed decision.
I agree. I also think it plays a huge part for anything long term. So I think that if there's going to be a long term, implication from data or from a decision, so like what we just said before, let's go back to the product images. The reason that I know it might be like you're just talking about product images, but the reason that this is so important is because of the long-term implications. So if we made a decision that was based on gut and not by data, and we made the wrong decision, that could then say at Christmas time when our traffic was at its all-time high, that's our go time. That's our time to make as much bank as we can, because at that point in our careers, that was when we would make something like 80% of overall revenue in like 3 months. So it is go time. If we're not looking at that data, then we could be, decreasing the conversion rate from anything from, 5 to 3%, which is huge. Like these things like add to cart rate, conversion rate, like they make such a huge implication for volume type businesses that you need to look into it. That's an example of like a long-term implication of a data-led decision.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that even outside of the e-commerce space, like when you're making decisions, say for example, you wanted to put together like a pricing structure for a particular product, and you think that say $60 is a good price to charge for something. If you're just saying, I feel like that's a good price to charge based on just the fact that you feel like that's what I would spend and pay for the product, or that's what I think it would cost in a shop or whatever it would be. What are you doing to
Prove
actually literally to prove it? Because you have no idea if you don't looking at the data there, how much does that item cost?
Absolutely.
Like what's your actual margin on that physical product? If you're not looking at that, how is the instinct, like you could be making a 10% margin on a product you're charging $60 for if you haven't looked at all of your costs properly. And that's where a real life example of where if you're not looking at the data and the evidence behind making that decision, which could seem like very superfluous at the time, between what's the difference between $60 or $70 or $80, for example, you know, $10, you don't think of it as a long-term implication. But in the long run, when you compound that decision on a volume basis, it's a huge thing.
Absolutely. Sorry, I just like superfluous or whatever. It's a really big word. I like it.
Yeah, superfluous.
How do you say it?
Superfluous.
Superfluous. Far out. I feel like I can't say things that fast because I just get all like mumbly and weird.
I think I do too.
I liked it. No, that was good.
No,
You go, girl. I liked it. I love
but,
superfluous.
Yeah.
I really, really liked it. I want to use bigger words. I feel like my vocabulary's just absolutely gone to poo since like life.
Since life, wow.
Since like, especially with AI, I'm just like, you be the smart one. I'll be the other guy.
That's fair enough, I guess.
So
we'll get you onto like Duolingo or something. We'll train you back up.
Another way that the data can be used for decision making as well is one thing that I like to do is hold people to account through data. So an example of that is when you were chatting before, one of the things that popped into my head is when you're working with agencies, and I see it as a real sore spot for businesses that are looking to scale their teams or to scale their marketing. Well, a lot of different businesses use marketing agencies for all different reasons, and I think using data to make decisions is really, because if you don't know what you're talking about, so say you've got a marketing agency, the reason for that is because one, time poor, or two, you don't really understand the world of marketing. Fair. That's not your skill set. But when they're starting to say all these words at you and you're like, oh, I don't know, like, right, you can't really trust your guts. You're in a position where you have to use data. And I think putting it back on, you know, your freelancers or the people that you work with to be like, well, can you give me some data to support that? Can you give me some data to support that? It'll help give you confidence in your decision making when you're not that sure about what's going on.
Yeah, that's actually a really great way of looking at it. It's like data is a great way to act as an additional assurance.
Yeah.
But when you're not certain of, I guess, a situation or
it's not your skill set.
Yeah, exactly. When it's not your skill set. And I
use it for like operations, like anything operational in the business. Oh my God, a P&L. Are you joking? Like I had to learn what I needed to know to make the decision, but I didn't necessarily need to know what it was. So I can't make operational decisions based on gut because that's not my skill set. My skill set isn't operational or finance or accounts. It's not it. So when I'm making those decisions, it has to be based on data. Now that could sound, oh yeah, of course, if you're not making money, of course it's based on data. But these are other decisions like that have huge implications, whether it's labor costs, what you said before about margins, but there's all these different things that, I don't necessarily understand the ins and outs of it, but I need the data. I need to know, okay, well, what did it look like before? What did success look like for in the past? And how do we improve on that?
Yeah.
Otherwise, I can't be like my past role was a general manager, and I couldn't make those decisions without knowing the past. When you're having to manage a team of people that you have no idea what they do because that's not your skill set, what you need to know is at least what success looks like and what those danger zones are.
Yeah, and even when it is your skill set, I think to your point, we were talking about gut-led decisions when it comes to creative processes and projects before. But on the flip side of it, there's definitely room and space for when you're making creative decisions and using data to then drive that.
Absolutely.
I think a great way, and I think we've touched on it maybe on the podcast before, is like that A/B split testing.
Yes.
So looking at, how holding one group for a piece of creative work and another group for a piece of creative work. And a great example for us, something that I think people would be very familiar with, is email subject lines. So it's not something that all of our listeners may not have had an opportunity to create their own email subject lines, but I'm damn sure that they've gotten emails before with some really kind of wacky things in them.
Yeah.
And the reason why is a lot of marketers, particularly a lot of digital marketers, will then use their like software to be able to split test and see the performance of a subject line. And that's a great example of like creatively driving data through into your decision-making process.
Yeah, and I can share an example of when that didn't work. So my gut would tell me that if you slap someone in the face with offer, they're more likely to open the emails. We had tested, this is just an example where we had tested 15% off store wide, whatever, something very, very, very to the point, direct. And then we had also tested, something, it was more like, you'll never believe this. Something like that with the little eyes, little emoji eyes, they go to the side. And I was like, oh, that's so subtle in the air. No one's going to open that. Well, that one won no one's business versus the other one. People would rather the mystery of an offer than being slapped in the face with offer. Because when you actually think about it, they're more, the offer could be bigger than 15%, but we've just told them straight up what it is.
Yeah.
So I think that proved me wrong without anyone's. I was like, oh, okay, I need to stop being so
you got to be more mysterious, Tash.
Mysterious. I know, I have no mystery to me, hence the podcast where I overshare every detail about my life. But yeah, no, I think it's based on that. And that's where it comes into play, okay? So that's when you use gut, that's when you use data. Okay, so when do you use both? And I think there should be a marriage of both of them in most decisions that you make. And that's just, I think, regardless of whether it's a completely data-driven decision or a completely gut, there always is going to be a play at it, like we spoke about before. And it's just that balance of intuition and analysis.
Yeah, I think creative examples, I know that this is our space and that's where we lean into, but I'm sure there are other very practical applications of this. But I think if you use your gut intuition to know as the starting point and then using data to validate that experience and confirm that, go with your gut. But if there's a piece of data to be able to affirm that, that's great. And I think let's use the candidate example again. You might meet someone and be like, this person would just be fantastic. They would fit within my team. But not even on paper. Say if you go the other way around. Say if you go with a gut decision to start off with, I've met them, I think they would be great, I want to poach them.
Yeah.
Well, then you get them to do maybe a test to validate that. Say you would get them to do a recruitment task to see if they're actually worth their salt, because you can get a really good feeling from someone, but you want to be able to back that up and make sure that they've got the data behind them to be able to drive and make that decision in terms of a recruitment perspective.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And so they're okay, that's what they should be used for. But I think a really important question is, how do we then improve that? Because I think it's really clear on how to, not clear, but there's more clarity around how to improve data making decisions, skills on that sense.
Use your data.
You use your data. Know that you don't have to know everything. I think with the data, how to improve in, leading with data is, you don't have to know everything. You don't need to know how they got there. You just need to know how to interpret it. I think that's a really important thing that I learned, because I was so stuck in if I'm getting this data, I need to know how they got it. So I was really, really, really concerned with how to get this data, and I wasn't actually tailoring my skills or getting really into the interpretation of the data. And it wasn't until I nailed the interpretation of data that I was then able to nail that certain part of my role. It was prior to that, I was just too busy in the weeds.
Yeah, that's
to know.
That's actually such a good point, because it isn't about you can have the person that puts together the fancy spreadsheets, whatever. And I know that there's so many people out there that are like, spreadsheets aren't that hard, but I find them hard sometimes.
I find them completely difficult.
But I think it's that processing skill, that interpretation skill. And honestly, I think this is very topical. It's a very important time to be thinking and considering this, because with AI and everything coming into it, people are going to get a shitload of data. It's going to be easier than ever before to get it. But like anything in the world, you can have all the fancy whiz-bang tools. You need to then make a decision out of it, though. You need to be able to understand and interpret it, what it means. And I think that the more that you practice looking through the data and having, I guess, a goal or an objective out of it, then that's how you can start to sharpen those skills.
Absolutely. And then you've got gut. So gut's a bit of the one in the air. It's okay, how do I improve my gut-made decisions? And I think in that situation, it's just working on, self-awareness, empathy, mindfulness. It's if you're not at your best, your gut's not going to be at its best, and your decision-making skills aren't going to be at its best. So what we've said in the past, and I couldn't agree with this more, is make sure your cup's filled before you make any gut-making decisions, because your gut is emotional. It's where all your emotions are, and you're all over the place. Yeah. So if you're anxious, or you're, I don't know, a bit shitty, or whatever it is, and you're not filling up your own cup because you're too busy filling up everyone else's, you're not going to make the right decision.
No.
Because your gut's going to be tainted.
Yeah, exactly. Now, self-awareness there is a really important piece to be able to understand how to better use your gut instincts. But yeah, that's I think that's a really great way to kind of look at things. I loved being able to kind of marry those two together. And I think that no matter which side you lean on, there's validity in both. So where you can, try to use them together, and I think you'll end up coming to some really great results as a result of that.
They're not mutually exclusive, they're complementary, Both approaches are completely fine. It's just about finding a way to work with them together so that you're able to kind of grow both and make decisions based on both as well.
Love it.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much for listening. We will be in your ears this time next week, and we'll see you then.
See you then. Bye.